Good evening. I'm Karen Sander, the Director of Public Programs for the CUNY Graduate Center, and we are so delighted to have you join us here tonight for what promises to be a provocative and lively conversation on Afromodernism and the arts. We have an incredible panel of artists and thinkers who are shaping the cultural and intellectual landscape and who will share their thoughts and work on this topic. I'd like to offer a welcome to all of you who are here in person, but also welcome our large online audience who are tuning in from places across the globe. We hope to see all of you back at many more public events this semester, whether here in New York City or online. For tonight's program, we are pleased to partner with the New York Philharmonic, who is doing a series of programs exploring Afromodernism. And we are also grateful to the Graduate Center's PhD and DMA program in music for co-sponsoring this event. And I'm pleased to welcome many of our PhD composition students who are here with us tonight. Our music program is one of our more than 30 departments that offer graduate programs here at the CUNY Graduate Center. Now it is my pleasure to turn the mic over to Gary Padmore, the New York Philharmonic's Vice President for Education and Community Engagement, who we are proud to claim as a CUNY alum. Thank you.
That's right, CUNY. That's right, CUNY. Good evening. Good evening. Oh, okay. So making sure y'all are here. Okay. So yes, my name is Gary Padmore. I just want to also lift up my friend and colleague, Jeannie Oliver Cretara, who's the co-producer on the Unanswered Questions program. So shout out to Jeannie. And also thank you to the Graduate Center. Thank you to Karen, to Suzanne, just for your partnership. And we're looking forward to building many more opportunities to explore and really interrogate, what we do at the Philharmonic. And I just want to also lift up the dopest leaders in the field, the artists, the thinkers, the leaders, the people who Karen mentioned are really shaping how we experience the arts. And so I'm going to just pass it over because we're limited on time to our esteemed moderator, Tanisha Ford, who's a Harlem-based writer, researcher, and cultural critic working at the intersection of politics and culture, forging an international reputation for her groundbreaking research on the history of Black style, fashion, and social movements. A professor here at CUNY in history. And also, Tanisha wrote a book where she received an award. Her book, Secret Society, won the 2024 NAACP Image Award for outstanding work of biography, autobiographies. Let's give Tanisha a round of applause for the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary, for that introduction. It is my honor to moderate this conversation tonight. I want to say welcome to you all, again, those of you in person and those joining us virtually. Thank you also to the staffs of the New York Philharmonic and the Graduate Center for coordinating this event, specifically Jeannie Oliver Cretara, Manager of Teaching and Learning at New York Phil, and also Gary Padmore, whom you just heard from, the Vice President of Education and Community Engagement. It's because of you that we have programs that center Black voices, Black culture, and politics. Also, big thank you to Karen Sander, Director of Public Programs at the Graduate Center, for making sure everything was together logistically for this event. I want to start off just by saying the world is on fire. You don't need me to tell you this. And this is nothing new for people of African descent around the world, but it's troubling and infuriating nonetheless. When I think of Afromodernism, I think of its Black internationalist impulses. Inspired by the Haitian Revolution, early Black internationalists forged political solidarity with Black people and other peoples of color around the world to end colonialism, imperialism, capitalist oppression, and war-aided repression. They offered a Pan-Africanist vision for the future. Thus, Afromodernism in the arts, as I see it, is not merely a discussion about art for art's sake. It is about the long arc of Black creative expression of these politics, philosophies, and intellectual and organizing traditions. Afromodernism isn't merely a Black version of European articulations of modernism. It is a refusal of anti-Black violence in all its forms. It is Black artistic production that centers Africa and its diaspora. I'll start with some introductions. Our distinguished panel. In the interest of time, I'm going to read abbreviated bios, but let me tell you, every person who's here and or will be here is a leader in their field and their industry. And excuse me, is a leader in their field or their industry, and I encourage you to go to nyphil.org to read their extended biographies. I'll begin to my immediate left with Nathalie Joachim, a Grammy-nominated performer and composer who is premiering a new cello concerto written for cellist Seth Parker Woods and the New York Philharmonic. This season's highlights for Nathalie also include new works for Carnegie Hall, Orpheus Chamber Orchestra, Grant Park Music Festival, and Spoleto Festival USA. She is an assistant professor of composition at Princeton University. Sade Lythcott is a Tony and Emmy Award nominated producer, writer, and chief executive officer of Harlem's historic National Black Theater, or NBT, the nation's first revenue-generating Black arts complex and one of the longest-running theaters by a woman of color. She is the daughter of the late Dr. Barbara Ann Tier, founder of NBT and legendary champion of African American arts and culture. Sade currently serves as the chair of the Coalition of Theaters of Color and is on the board of directors for the Brooklyn Academy of Music. And listen, you all laughed a little bit earlier, but let me just say, traffic out there is terrible. Okay, so we are holding space right now for our comrade and sister, Amy Andrieux, an award-winning curator, educator, and creative. She is the executive director and chief curator at the Museum of Contemporary African Diasporan Art, or MOCADA, in Brooklyn. Amy is also the founder of the Arts Alliance of Africa and Diaspora, a global network of Black arts leaders creating sustainable community solutions, and is a 2024-2025 Mellon Fellow for Faculty Excellence at the New School. Thank you for being here. I want to pose a question to you both, just to start us out. Because when I think about this term Afromodernism, it's a broad and capacious term. So let's start by having each of you explain what this term means to you as it resonates with, or perhaps is even in opposition to, your creative work, your vision, and your political commitments.
Shall I? Oh, hi. Well, thank you all for being here, and thank you for such a beautiful introduction and a wonderful question. I think that my answer to this question, in some ways you've touched upon already, right? This idea of who actually gets to define modernity, and where and why we carry those specific definitions. To me, it was not us, right, who sort of like put this idea of primitiveness on Black people, on people of color. And I hope we understand so much more about history with every passing moment to understand why we may have been labeled in that way. But as we know, like, to me, the idea of modernity means that you are a person responding actively to the time that you are living in, and a person who is doing that in consideration of the past and the future. And so, to some extent, to be a Black creative in this moment is to be actively participating in modernity. Black people have always been, and therefore we have always been modern. And so, while obviously, so much of my own work is about celebrating, cherishing, re-examining, and also reinventing our ways of expression. and sharing our stories, past, present, and future. Of course, the African diasporic subject is me. So it's something that I study deeply as I come more and more into myself. But I'm not really concerned with, I guess, with anybody else's concept of modernity, because especially as a Haitian person, I have to say that when I look back at the Haitian Revolution, the thing that is most fascinating to me, you know, we talk a lot about the end of the revolution and its aftermath, which we're still experiencing. But what is beautiful to me is that liberation movement began with a coming together of enslaved people who were living in Haiti and trying to understand that they were, or I guess standing in the understanding that they were standing at world's end, right? That there was either figuring out a new pathway forward or submitting to death, that there was no other option. And in that moment, the thing that they did was reach back to the very things that had come to them come with them to Haiti from the continent, right? That they used modern technologies that came from the continent with them. The technologies connected to spirituality, the technologies connected to our storytelling ability, the technologies connected to our ability to continually define and redefine ourselves, the technology that's connected to our artistic expression in dance and music, and not to create a new system in which they were became the oppressors of anyone else or put themselves in the place of their oppressors. Hi, welcome.
Blame Uber.
But that they saw those techniques as what allowed them to dream and reimagine what I'm sure could only have felt like an impossible future, right? That it was that moment that allowed them to see some new possibility. And if that doesn't define modernity, then I kind of don't know what else does. So it lives in me, it lives in my work, it lives in my people, it lives in what I celebrate.
That was really, really beautiful. And I don't know if I have so much more to contribute, except for I will say, you know, there is this proverb that says, it's an African proverb that says, if you know the beginning well, the end will not trouble you. And I think when we think about modernity, and we think about the continent, it is the cradle of civilization. It is the birth of ideas. It is the birth of everything that would come before. And so, you know, when I think about Afromodernism, outside of the reflections that have already been given, it really is a call to action, and it's also a call to remember. And I think it is also decentralizing the connotations that one might have with these terms, both Afro and modernism, and within the kind of language of them both, to look at all of the spaces and that can and need to be decolonized, because in some ways it is an oxymoron, right? This idea of like that you have to codify modernity with putting Afro in front of it to understand it differently, as opposed to understanding that if you know the beginning well, the end will not trouble you. So before there was the complexity of how all of our civilizations have evolved, there was that continent, there was that sound, there was that beat, there was those people to which birthed everything that we now sit and discourse about. And so for me, I think it is very much about, when I think about modernism, I think about technology, and I think about the most kind of incredible technology is indigenous technologies. And it is what we say in our own communities, making a way out of no way, right? It's the alchemy of what it is to exist as a person of the diaspora. But also when we think about Africa as the cradle of civilization, when we think about the present moment and we think about the global majority, you really do want to lean forward in your seat and ask why we're having this conversation with this discourse as like a genre of sorts. And instead having a conversation of how we got so far away from what these seed ideas and thoughts around liberation, around innovation. They're every major art movement, science movement, you can trace back to the beginning on the continent. So I think this is a conversation about reclamation. It is a conversation about I don't want to say right-sizing, but course-correcting a lot of appropriation that has gotten us on the stage to talk about something that feels very focused, but in actuality, this idea of decolonizing how we be with each other, how we see each other, where our art is derivative from, replacing it back, writing it back into the history in its rightful place. And so when I think about Afromodernism and this conversation tonight, I think about that. And when I think about the work of National Black Theater, I think about making a way out of no way, creating a way in which to work in a very Western connotation of theater, more blackly, or sans a white lens. And so it's incumbent of us, when we think about Afromodernism, to think about it as a movement of liberation. And so that's what this conversation is. It's about reclamation and it's about liberation, because at the end, we begin with the fact that it all comes from the continent, and really being able to have conversations and color the way we talk and relate to each other with that understanding at its core.
So Amy, we're just talking about Afromodernism, like what this term means to you in terms of your work, how you approach it.
I feel like I'm going to be the radical person on the stage.
We love it.
And to start, I think I would want to quote Larry Neal, one of the fathers of the Black Arts Movement. And one of the things he said was that the Black Arts Movement was created to be radically opposed to anything that takes the Black people, Black artists specifically, outside of the Black community. And that's what Afromodernism does to me. When I hear Afromodernism, when I hear modernism, I think of artists who at one point were creating works for their patrons, for these rich families, for these religious figures, and then decided, wait a minute, I have another context that I want to present. I don't see Afro in that, for me, because that's still within their gaze. So I would want to depart from that completely. I would prefer to use a word like, Kuumba. Dr. Karenga brought that back to us through Kwanzaa, this idea of creativity to empower the community, to benefit the community. I would go with the Indikra symbol, Anansi and Totan, which means creativity. That is in part of the grand design, because I think that's what the work of Black art does, and that's what I hope my work does as a curator, as an educator, et cetera. The other problem that I have with Afromodernism is that it only speaks to the Black American experience. And I think I came in when you were talking about being Haitian. I'm also Haitian. So for me, I think it's really important that we don't neglect Africa. We don't forget the Caribbean. We don't forget Latin America. We don't forget the Black bodies that were in Asia, et cetera, et cetera. So even if we were to say today, yes, Afromodernism is the base that we can start from, it's incomplete for me.
Yeah, thank you. Nathalie Joachim. Is that closer? Is that closer? Joachim. Bringing so much drama to it. So we're here in large part because of your work. to celebrate your work and your contributions to the musical landscape. And we've had a chance as an audience to view part of your music video. And so I'm wondering, as I looked at it, I was thinking about the landscape, the colorways, the ancestral connections and references. And I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit more about the concerto as a form and how your approach to the concerto changes the way the form is articulated or expressed. And where do you draw your inspiration?
Many questions, and all good questions. Where I draw my inspiration is actually a great place to start. I know that some of you got a chance to see some of a music video of mine that was playing in the sort of pre-show, but it might be good to show just a short clip of it now, and it displays a lot of my inspiration, so I'll start at that point, if we have that clip. Thank you. It's funny that clip was only about, I'm the only person in it, but I did not mean that I drew my inspiration from myself. This video has a lot of significance and importance to me because I was able to shoot it last August on my family's land, which is in the southern region of Haiti for any Haitian people. It's a small village just outside of Okai, and my family has been on that land for 7 generations now and counting. This video meant so much to me because I, for so long, have been speaking about this place that is like magic for me, and is the place that feels most like home and has been transformative for me personally and professionally in so many ways because it has continually reminded me of who I am and who I come from. And so it serves as my greatest point of inspiration. This video is actually not a huge budget music video made with some like big production house. I had a very tiny budget of my own few dollars, and it was those few dollars and the entire village coming together quite literally to do everything from sew outfits, feed us, gather chickens that we needed for some of the filming, participate in the video, become dancers, become characters and participants. Later on in the video, you see my whole family lined up, and it's true that this, when they say it takes a village, I really saw the strength of that, but it was so utterly my Haitian experience, like what it means to me, which is having a sense of collectivity, doing something together, that like my deciding to shoot that music video on that particular weekend in that space was not a singular thing that people are like, oh, that's happening down the street. For the community, this video was not just my video, it was our video, right? Because I'm a part of them, and they wanted to make sure that it was a success as well. And so every single thing that they could do to contribute to its success is what happened in the village at that moment. So I come from an understanding, a deep understanding of collectivity. It is our community that, nobody is ever looking for us. We're not in one of the big cities. These are generations of families who have grown up together. And so when there is a natural disaster or when there is unrest in the country, as there is right now, it is us who continually care for one another. And so my spirit is really built on a sense of collectivity. So you can imagine imagine that when the New York Philharmonic and our partner commissioners came to me and said, we'd love for you to write a concerto, I got a huge question mark over my head, because the more I looked at a concerto, I was like, this just doesn't seem right? The whole structure of it is about putting a singular person at the helm of the orchestra. Usually, a lot of the orchestral parts are not that exciting. You have a lot of people sitting on stage not doing too much, and you have one person doing as many acrobatic, showboaty, crazy things. Like, we get it. We heard the cadenzas. We know you can play. We're still here. It's not that exciting. It's uninteresting to me, that kind of look at me and only me type of showboating. So it became an interesting challenge on like how to just fully subvert the idea of that form. The concerto itself, which I hope you are going to come in and see, but it begins actually not even on stage. It begins with an offstage brass band that is in a part that's inspired, in fact, by what's kind of a typical funeral procession that happens in my family's village. When somebody passes away, there is a religious ceremony to commemorate their life, and then there is a procession with a brass band that happens through the village, and as they pass your house, you're invited to join in the procession, to have this joyful shared moment together where you are all collectively inviting each other into this space of remembrance, right? A space being held for somebody who is no longer physically here, but will always be remembered and held in this space. And so I wanted to, at the very least, start the concerto in that space as an invitation for everyone in this space to participate. And though Seth, who's the soloist, has like so many beautiful moments to truly shine, much of that shining happens with a quiet power. There's very little showboating. The most showboaty moments are actually everybody on stage kind of raucously participating. But it was important to me for us to understand that power is not always coming from the loudest voice in the room. Power and strength is not always coming from the person saying the most or doing the most, but in fact, this idea that like his quiet strength is one that reigns over a collective energy that continues to sort of pulse through the piece. So it's maybe not a concerto, but it was exciting to me to be able to do that. And its inspiration really came from the idea of Black dandyism, which is a fashion movement, but one that has allowed us through many generations to have a sense of like redefining of personhood. And I also feel like a subversive sort of like political consciousness making, right? Like, what does it mean to be a Black person who steps into this space as sort of this like this idea that is utterly the opposite of what you might imagine me to have been, right? And what your concept of my sense of self should be, right? And to be able to harness that quietly without saying a word when you step in the room was really exciting for me. And of course is a fashion movement, but you see it very much woven into the fabric of our liberation movements. You can't even, if somebody says civil rights era to you in your mind, right now, the thing that pops into most people's minds is like, yes, of course, the leaders of that movement, but most certainly the way that you picture these people is of people sort of like dressed to the nines, right? People who are like, that's like actually what makes a lot of the images around those movements so horrifying, right? Like, how could this be happening to people who are presenting themselves in this way? So it is something that we've been doing quietly, but not just here. Haitian people are the most sort of, we're proud, and we always show up looking good, right? That's like a very kind of Haitian way. A lot of Caribbean people that way. You see it, of course, and especially when you look in on the continent, when you look at Pan-Africanism and the liberation movements that happened beginning in the late 50s into the 90s in the continent, you also see that kind of expression becoming important and harnessed in such a deep way. It's embedded in the films of those times. It's embedded in the photography of of those times, and it is very much, it's also a part of the music of those times, right? I think of like Nigerian high life music, right? Which is a music that was about this, like celebrating this ease of life that is like beautiful, right? And so I tried to infuse a lot of that into the piece. I also just wrote the piece, right? So it feels like me too, but it was exciting to be able to like take the orchestra, which is sort of like the pinnacle of Eurocentricity, right? A place where that was never designed to hold us, right? And to this day, we see very little of us participating in those spaces. So what does it mean to just like have at least one moment to like utterly infuse it with all of these points of inspiration that are drawn and have inspired me from Black expression throughout the diaspora.
Nice. Yes. I hope you're going to go see this concerto.
Yeah.
So much in what you said resonated with me in my own work. I mean, my first book, Liberated Threads, looked at how fashion was a form of political communication across the Africa and its diaspora. So I'm thinking about how political language is shared through dress and clothing. And so I don't want to spend a lot of time on this question because we've already kind of talked about these things a little bit. You all have touched on it in your initial response to my first question, and that is about technology. In the time period I'm now studying, in this current book project I'm working on, that's set in the early 20th century, I'm thinking about how Black artists, Black intellectuals, Black journalists across the diaspora utilize the technology of the day in order to galvanize, in order to build a movement of resistance. So I'm thinking about their use of cameras and photography. I'm thinking about typewriters, how they're using the printing press, for example. So I'm wondering if, just very briefly, if each of you could give a contemporary example of how you see Black artists or Black arts administrators using technology as a tool of insurgence or a resistant tool. And if we could, just maybe not social media as an example, because I feel like we often talk about social media. So I'm wondering if there's any other ways that you see technology being used in ways that we saw it used in earlier movements, as again a form of not only resistance but a form of refusal, a form of transgressive use.
I think for me, it's about conquering or combating misinformation in general. I'm also a techie. I spent many years working behind the scenes in tech. So one of the things that was important for me at Mokata was finding a way to bridge the gap between visual arts and technology specifically. So about 2 years ago, we started working with Verizon to create a series of apps for kids all around, one, the Black Greats of Art, which walks them through kind of the generations of art makers from, let's say, the 1920s till now, and also gives them an opportunity to create art in that kind of style or influence. Another app that we created with Verizon was around climate change. We said, okay, how can we talk about what's happening across the globe to Black bodies as a result of climate change? So we did an 11-lesson series around climate change through the diaspora. So we go from Dakar to Brazil to Vieques to Flint, et cetera, to give young people a perspective on who we are and how we're being impacted and what we can do in our own neighborhoods to make change locally. So that's how we're incorporating technology, but it's just one way, not every way.
This audience is great. By the way, this audience is just amazing.
So much love.
So I'm like the opposite in many regards, because I'm constantly thinking about what we were taught to forget. And so when I think about technology, I think about ritual. I think about alchemy, which is the highest form of technology, which has just become, through a series of processes, a product by which we can use and have used and manipulated and have been manipulated through the lens of this thing called technology. But at the end of the day, the thing about why technology is so powerful is that it has the ability to tell story and narrative. And storytelling with ritual are really the most quintessential technology that never, the way in which we access it, use it, manipulate it, that may change and evolve, but back to the core of, if you remember the beginning, well, the end will not trouble you, ritual for me is that. National Black Theater was created out of a desire to go back, not to a past that stories us as enslaved, but back to the continent in which our rituals were the only thing that kept us free, even if that freedom was just in our minds. And so when I think about how do we use the evolution of modern technology to create a healing algorithm in which technology can service what ritual has always held. So what I like to do when people ask me a tech question is really uplift, the importance of tradition and ritual in order to heal, that we don't have to kind of brand ourselves through the lens of different control mechanisms. But, Nathalie said a word that I think is so important, but subvert what is supposed to, what is being architected. And so for me, that is ritual and storytelling. But if we follow that arc and we think about, some of the origins of National Black Theater and really rooting everything in ritual in order to heal through our narratives, I think about our new building that we're building. We're redeveloping the city block that Dr. Thier bought in 1986. And we are resurrecting a space called the Temple of Liberation. And when she did her first capital project in 1991, she imagined this kind of theater in the round, this templed space, this space of sacredness, of spirituality, of subversion. National Black Theater in its title is subverting all of these forms. National, like we are the home for Black theater in America and of the diaspora, but we are also nationalists, right? This double entendre. So we're using ritual, and we're using ritual in a modern context by commissioning Nona Hendricks to take the last words of Dr. Thier, The Land of Vision, and turning it into a digitally immersive XR experience, because what we know is that the message of ritual, of storytelling, to place us back into our wholeness, to be whole and holy, is essential, and that we can manipulate technology to do that on a cellular level. So all of this XR technology, which is AR, XR, VR, and AI, right? We've seen the science point to the fact that most veteran hospitals use these technologies to cellularly heal the trauma of some veteran population. So we're thinking about that, right? We as African diasporic people also experience PTSD, obviously, on a daily basis. Michelle Alexander coining the term post-traumatic slave syndrome. And so what are our stories in service of? And so we are in our new building transitioning from live theater, live storytelling, to be able to incorporate a cellularly impactful storytelling modality that uses technology to do that, which we're very, very excited about. But it all starts with indigenous technologies as the source of it all.
Nice. Nathalie, I don't know if you have an example that you want to share. If not, it's okay, but.
I know. I feel like I fall basically just between these lands, right? I wrote for an orchestra, but I mostly write electroacoustic music. At the same time, I am constantly leaning back to folklore and ritual practice, right? The thing that is the space that's interesting to me is that in story making, we know that what is voiced is not always exactly what was remembered, right? or that what is remembered is perhaps not always what has been voiced, and that what has been voiced is not always what has been embodied, which I think speaks to a lot of what you just explained, right? And so the space of embodiment, to me, has been like a capsule for our reinvention of self. And I would say that being able to see, especially young artists, tap into that kind of embodied practice, both through musical expression, dance, et cetera, visual art creation, and using these new technologies in ways that can be manipulated alongside or within an embodied practice, I think is a beautiful kind of that's like my zone that I love so much. I don't dip too deep into technology, and I don't know that I dip all the way into ritual either, but I love the space that holds both. Like, how are you continuing to be embodied? Because that is the thing that allows for like generational remembrance or regeneration of thought and creation across time, but also using the tools that we're presented with as like new possibilities, right? Like how to manipulate these things without losing that sense of embodiment, I think, is the space that I'm most excited about in terms of like the way that I work, and also the way that I see other young Black artists working today.
Can I speak to that? Because I keep hearing like this underlying kind of disconnection, and I don't feel like we are disconnected at all. I believe there's psychic memory that we're tapping into.
Yeah.
It's always been there.
Yeah, for sure.
Even when we can't define it, it's there, you know? But I think we have to be careful with the language, though, because sometimes we're saying we are reconnecting, and it's like, we're not disconnected. Let's not accept that. Yeah. It's not the truth, you know?
Perhaps a better word is like re-engaging. I mean,
but also I think you have to meet people where they are. People are out of their bodies. People do need to remember. I think that we are sitting on a stage and have a lot of privilege within our practice. And I think that some of the things that, like, you know, we're the longest running and oldest Black theater in New York City, and we are in Harlem. We are not downtown, we are nowhere else. Like, it was intentional to move uptown and this maverick, visionary founder woman who was an Afrofuturist, who was one of the architects of the Black arts movement, she understood that you have to meet people where they are, and language is an entry point for that. You can't know where you're going if you don't kind of know where you're at. And so I agree with you. It is all in us. From my perspective, you're 1,000% correct. And we also have the privilege to know that. And I think a lot of folks need the invitation into something, to tap into something that is within them, but that needs to be maybe awakened or reawakened. But this idea of remembering and recalling is I think important, because it places you where you're at and it meets you there. And it doesn't say that there's no judgment. For me, from my perspective, there's no judgment, there is no shame, but it is an invitation. And I think at the end of the day, like, we are all an offering to, our ancestors' unfinished song, and we have to remember that they're still singing in order to understand the direction in which we go. So I totally think we were born complete.
So let me give you something else, Amy, to riff off of with that, because I appreciated what you said earlier, too, even about how the language of Afromodernism is not a language that really works with your practice, and that's something when I originally framed the question that I said, if this resonates with your practice or not, right? And so I appreciate you saying that, and I also appreciate what you're saying about, how these stories, they live in us. There's a psychic connection, there is an ancestral connection. So I'm wondering if we bring that to the museum space. And I know Mokata is a museum and so much more in the Brooklyn community. I really want to hear you talk a bit about this, how the museum functions and how you function as a curator, curating our stories, our histories, especially in light of, we all lived through this 2020 moment of the so-called racial reckoning, and we immediately saw the retrenchment in terms of, withdrawal of financial support and many other things. There were all these promises around. And still, right, around, anti-racism. But in that moment, there was this call to decolonize the museum. And so I'm wondering, given your radical practice as you articulated it earlier, what does this even mean to you? And since Mokata is Black 365, meaning Black every day of the year, what does a Black radical museum practice look like?
Well, I have to say this first. I don't know if my predecessors were as radical as I am. I'll say that. I think there has been radical moments for sure. I think because of the time that I'm occupying the space, I have no choice but to be radical, if that makes sense. But I will say this. Mokata was started in 1999 through Lori Cumbo, who at the time was investigating whether a Black arts institution could give back to neighboring Black communities. This was at a time where Bed-Stuy was Black, Fort Greene was Black, Crown Heights was Black, and there were so many, and so forth and so forth. And there were so many artists who were living in the neighborhood who could not get access to MoMA, Whitney, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's why Mokata started, for those two reasons. So social justice has always been a part of our fabric. So fast forward to 2020, and everyone is like, social justice. And I'm like, what does social justice mean to y'all? Because for us, it is everything that we do. Our work is not, we like to say that our work is not just about putting art on the walls, although that is beautiful. We're also a center of care. So when folks come into our space, it's also about giving them resources to survive. How are we giving to our community? How are we facilitating conversations about the things that are impacting us globally, not just here in Brooklyn, not just here in New York City, but around the world. How are we bridging the divide between Black communities, period, full stop. How are we, connecting the dots between Africa and the diaspora? How are we ensuring that we're not centering America before Africa? So there are so many of these different conversations that are kind of layered in our work. Yes, it comes through in exhibitions, but it also comes through in the apps that we create. It comes through in the public art pieces that we create, in the workshops we host, to the performances that we present. So it's not just necessarily one form in our context, in the museum context. It's about kind of elevating the conversation at the heart of it.
Nice, thank you. So at this time, I want the audience start thinking about your questions that you want to pose to the panelists. I'm going to ask a final question, and then we're going to open it up for discussion with you all. So, Sade, you talked a bit about the origins of the NBT, and of course you didn't say it, but I said your amazing mother, Dr. Tier. Can you bring us into the space in terms of how does Black theater function today? I think even when I think about the work that I do in the early 20th century, the so-called Harlem Renaissance, but I think about it as a larger Black internationalist movement in which New York was just one nodal point. But if we think about that New Negro Renaissance, oftentimes the theater is overshadowed by the music, by the literature, and so tell us a little bit about the functions of a Black theater and the Black theater tradition, both then and now. We'll end with you.
It's a great question. So there's a lot, and I'll be brief. Dr. Tier really sought to subvert the American experience by going into community and through the most powerful medium on earth, from her vantage point, storytelling, heal a community. And that was important because our stories, whether it's what we tell ourselves in the morning when we wake up and brush our teeth, or it's the history books our babies pick up to read about how the world has come to be, dictate how we exist in the future. So stories are constantly shaping our worldview every second of every day, and that we could own that story. And so for her, moving to Harlem was critical, and subverting this experiment of being brought to this country in shackles by creating something that we have never as African Americans had, which is a home away from home. So like we see, MBT as our 40 acres and our mule, we also see it as the crown that has been paid for, that we are intentionally weaving the indigenous technologies of the continent and the spirituality, because culture is the bowl that holds it all. And that this great experiment, which is National Black Theater, can give us back to ourselves whole, complete, and full of joy. It can also, where you can feel seen, safe, and sacred, and reflected back in a certain kind, in the vibration of who we were truly born to be. And so on every level, she has created a blueprint of subversion to ensure that Black folks exist in the future whole and healed. Now, where theater gets tricky, especially in the lens of a contemporary lens and through the progress of the Western world catching up with the fact that, there is no culture without our contribution, full stop, in our wholeness. And so what's happened is it's been thinned out, appropriated, a version of, and today what you find is that the majority of Black theater is being produced in white spaces, especially, I would say, post 2015, when these white papers came out, really articulating why diverse voices are important. And what happened is that subverted this kind of communal, showing up for each other, and said there are resources to be had. And that shifted the landscape of predominantly white institutions being like, well, if someone's gonna pay for it and we get can tick that box, we're gonna start producing these stories. So there has been a quiet and slow and steady genocide of Black theaters in America. When National Black Theater was formed in 1968, there were over 1,000 Black theater collectives. Today, there are less than 150 theaters across the country that identify as theaters of color. So you're really dealing with this idea that the majority of our storytelling is being produced in white spaces by white producers for white audiences. And we are dying every day. And you think about the urgency, so then you begin to think about the urgency of why a National Black Theater, why Black theater and storytelling matters. Think about all of the characters, all of the people, your cousins, your aunties, that just don't exist on paper and in narrative because it's been flattened. So the same reason why Dr. Tier chose to leave Broadway and stage and film was for that same reason. If you can't see it, if you can't hear it, we're a storytelling people, we're oral people. If you can't see it and be it, then you can't be it. If you can't see it, you can't be it. And so it is incumbent of us to have spaces like Mokada. It is incumbent of us to have companies like Dance Theater of Harlem, to have spaces like the National Black Theater. I think about if Alvin Ailey never exists, could there be a Camille A. Brown? Could there be a Kyle Abraham? So this idea of the National Black Theater, we approach our work of theater making from a space of subversion, but also urgency, because we're preserving our culture through our authentic storytelling of intersectional Black life. And I could go on and I won't, because I know time is of the essence, but I think Black theater today, it's incumbent of us also to tell complex stories of our intersectionality, that we are in the business of transformation, and in order to be whole, you have to give voice to all of who we are as a people, and that doesn't exist in spaces that don't hold our culture at its core.
Nice, thank you. I could go on and on with questions. I mean, it's so rare. I hope you all know how rare this is to have people who represent these different spaces in the arts world, but have such a down-to-earth and community-focused approach to the work that they do all on one panel together. So I will stop talking at this time and open up the floor to you. Well, no, I'm going to talk for one more second just to lay some ground rules about what's going to happen when I open up this floor. Okay. So I'm going to ask, we're going to open up the floor for discussion because you all are a part of this conversation as well. But I will ask that you, in fact, ask a question and that you get to your question quickly. So the preamble you had, say that in your head, but only say the question part out loud, okay? And then I know that this is a respectful space, but I will just say, please respect our panelists. No disrespect will be tolerated because, again, I will cut you off if that does happen. If you don't feel like getting up or if you are unable to get up, just raise your hand. Someone will bring a mic around to you. Otherwise, there are mic stands on either side of the theater that you can get in line to pose your question. Okay, so we have a hand here in the front as well. Okay, so we'll start with this question here, and then we'll take the mic to the front. Go ahead.
Hi there. My name is Nina Kennedy. I am delighted to hear about this project with the New York Philharmonic. Congratulations, Nathalie.
Thank you.
We have been after the New York Philharmonic for decades to hire more African American musicians. I didn't say musicians of color. I said specifically African American, more conductors, more soloists, and we have just been ignored for decades. So I applaud this, and I'm very happy to hear about it. I wanted to illustrate my point, I wanted to ask if anybody has heard the name Ella Shepherd.
So is this the question for the panel?
Yeah, it's building up to that.
Well, so let's get right to that question, please. Thank you.
Okay, well, Ella Shepherd is, you've heard of the New World Symphony, Dvorak? New World Symphony? Okay. Ella Shepherd was a black woman born on Andrew Jackson's plantation who wrote the melody that Dvorak used in the New World Symphony. Second theme, first movement. Google her. She has a Wikipedia page now. But I wanted to ask how this project came about with the New York Philharmonic, what the relationship was that led up to this actual fruition for this project.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Also, yes, Dvorak is very well documented for having been a deep voyeur of African American culture. But this came about, I have to say, through, again, to go back to my own spirit, a spirit of camaraderie and collectivity. Seth Parker Woods and I have been friends for a very long time. We met when we were both living and working in Chicago. This is now the second piece that I've written for him. The very first piece that I wrote for him was commissioned by the Phillips Collection Gallery in Washington, D.C., and was really a piece of our own design. You know, Seth and I both were deeply sort of entrenched in the stories of the Great Migration at the time, and that what became the center of that piece. And we sought out commissioning partners that would be interested in it, and the migration became a sort of interesting and easy point of departure because Jacob Lawrence's migration series, Jacob Lawrence is a visual artist who has a beautiful series called the Migration Series, half of which is owned by the Phillips Collection, the other half of which you can go see at MoMA. And so it was Seth and I's friendship that brought that commission to life. It was Seth and I's friendship that also brought this commission to life. I think, you know, it would be wonderful to say that the New York Phil just kind of came knocking on my door, but it was really Seth and I advocating for our friendship, our ongoing and longstanding collaboration, and our trust in each other as friends and partners who have the great privilege of having access to institutions that can foster this kind of work. And so I feel bad because I would love to give the New York Film more credit than that, but our commissioning partners, the consortium of commissioners that came together, were commissioners that we sought out with an idea that we had collectively been interested in together as collaborators and partners, which is precisely why that continues to be my artistic spirit, that I constantly am leaning into my community, seeing their value, leaning into the fact that they also are allowing me to be expressive in space with them and creating opportunity for that. So much of my career is really a testament to the relationships that I've built with my friends and creative partners over time, many and most of whom are Black musicians and artists. And so I really cherish that, and I am, I will continue to do just that, whether the New York Philharmonic follows me or not, but I hope that they will.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go to the front for another brief question. I promise I'm a lovely person in real life, but I'm just charged with keeping the thing going. So we'll take a quick question in the front.
All right, ladies, we're very honored to have you on stage tonight. Very, very interesting comments from you. I have a problem with technology and AI, as they say. Do you people in your work feel that this electronicized age has compromised the audience's ability to connect? Do you feel that? I just want to say, forgive me, just one quick second. I was without a telephone for a whole year. And this was because of the chain of supply chain problems. And people were saying, well, Amy, how did you manage? And I snapped, wonderfully. I actually talked to people. I actually sat on the bus, on the train, walking, in the market. All this electronic stuff is separating us, although they want you to believe that it's all connecting us. What are your thoughts, please?
Thank you for your question. No. There's nothing to apologize for. I mean, when I talk about theater being urgent, I talk about it from that perspective. I really believe that theater is transformative because it's about connection and belonging and inviting people into a deeply human experience, sitting shoulder to shoulder with strangers, witnessing something that can only happen once in the moment, in the way that it happens, is transformational. You know, the train has left the station in terms of technology and how it separates us or brings us together, and it's incumbent of us to remember those rituals of belonging and connection to each other. I'm proudly an analog person. I fight for theater not just because it's a medium that I think is important to my community, but I think it's important to the human race. And I think that how we tell our stories is how we survive and exist in the future. And so I totally empathize with your frustration, and I think what you're witnessing on stage is an investment in connectivity, in collective creativity, in order to invite people into their own humanity in a deeper, more profound way through a lens that you may not have experience of. And there's no AI answer that's going to tell you how Black culture feels, sound, look, you know. And so it's incumbent of us to, really, truly, and it's incumbent of us to push back and to really take up space, human space, and to want, you know, the thing is that you got to want to belong to each other, right? You gotta want to belong to each other. And these mediums support us to do that.
But I also think it depends how you use technology as well. Because, you know, being first generation born in America, I remember, you know, everyone would crowd around the TV on Saturdays and Sundays to watch telenovelas. You know, I remember on Saturdays when my dad is having a party in the backyard, everyone would crowd around the radio to listen to Haitian radio. So technology is important to communities as well. I think it's how it's used in the context of our practice that matters. You know, so like as an example, also I should mention, there is something that is racially equitable, and it's called Latimer. If you haven't heard about Latimer, it's essentially ChatGPT, but centered and rooted in equity. So definitely look that up. That's one. The second thing I was gonna say was that, like, you know, I don't see nature as separate. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't see science as separate from ritual in my perspective. So as an example, right now we're currently building a project all around the Dogon tribe, but it's an AR, VR experience that when you come into the institution, you can explore and learn science through the African lens. We haven't seen that before. That's a way to encourage and uplift our community, create a sense of belonging, but also create a sense of understanding in communities that are not aware of our stories and how we saw the stars. Does that make sense? So I think technology, there's always gonna be a good and bad side of technology, but how we use it and how we ensure that it stays within the culture and community hands matters.
Nice. So let's actually, what we're gonna do is we're gonna have both of you say your question, and then we'll have the panelists respond. So we'll just have you say your question, then you quickly say your question, and then the panelists will respond.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you guys for being here. My name is Gabriela Higueran. I'm Nigerian, and my question specifically, so I'm a first gen, and I know some of you panelists are also first gen. So my question revolves around, like, how does your art, I'm trying to figure out how I want to say this in a respectful manner. How does your art reflect your background, your stories, even when, because my background is like, I had to include AFAM, which is like, oh, that's, you're just supposed to know that. I had to include white America, and then also my background of Nigerian America. And I'm at the point now where it's like, my background of Nigerian America, or just being Nigerian, has been so skewed and so diluted, where I'm at the point where I was like, no, it needs to be told. It needs to be told, not in relation of like what has been seen on TV in terms of starving Africans, not in told of like, oh, this is what we have done in terms of like, we didn't do anything. Not in told of like, we came here on slave boats, and even if we did, like, just the dignity and the lack of dignity, because when I go to school, it's like more so like, oh, oh God, I'm very passionate about this. Like, oh, you're an African booty scratcher. Oh, like when I turn the lights off, I don't see you. And it's between so many demographics. And I worked at, I went to Georgetown. I worked at Google, and now I'm a filmmaker because I want to retell that story because I'm so passionate about it. And I don't know if it's you, Amy, like who you were saying in the beginning, when you came on stage, you were like, the way you told your story in terms, not even a story, but like you said, like, I'm probably gonna disagree with everybody. I want to hear.
I didn't quite say that, but yes.
Not like that, but I want to hear a lot from you because I'm very passionate. Because like even like I've had to do.
So I'm so sorry. I love the passion.
Sorry, I'm done. I'm done.
Yeah, no. So did
Can you
say your
re-articulate the
Say your
question?
Okay, the
yeah.
question is like, how do you involve that in your art with keeping yourself and still trying to like ensure that everybody else is satisfied?
Yes.
Or maybe you don't. Maybe you
Don't worry about satisfying anybody. Yeah.
Delete that part. That's
the
step
first-
one.
That is the first.
We all
Go
agreed
to
on
this
that
side
one.
and take this question as well, and then someone on the panel can respond to each one of the questions. Go ahead.
I'm almost scared to ask the question, but
Go for it.
my question is, what is Afromodernism? Who invented the term? If you know the beginning well, the end will not trouble you. You need to do your research. That's it.
Okay. All right. So anybody want to respond? One person want to respond to the first question if it really spoke to you. Someone want to respond to the second question if it really spoke to you.
One, I just want to acknowledge Abisola, who is at the mic. She is one of the original liberators of the National Black Theater. She has been at the helm since 1968. And I also want to acknowledge our artistic director, executive artistic director, Jonathan McCrory, who is also here. And none of this is possible without both the foundation and the future of our organization. And so I will quickly say to the question over there, like, you got to stop caring what other people think. Your audience is you. And if it resonates to you, then it deserves to be in the world, because there's so many of you out there, but that is the only audience that matters. And, you know, my mother would always say, you need to decrud yourself, right? How to work more blackly. Like, honestly, this is about liberation, right? The first company of National Black Theater were called Liberators for that reason. And I feel your passion, but I also feel your pain, and of course, lots of trauma there. But the first thing that you can release yourself from is the approval of others.
I'll just like piggyback that by saying that, like, as somebody who has experienced the exact, I lost you in the room, I don't know where you went, but so as somebody who has experienced this exact feeling, right? When we were talking about this idea, like, is it a right word to say reconnection? Is it better to say re-engagement? Is it like easy enough to just say that you remember? Like, to me, I think of this idea of like transmission of our stories as that's why I use the term regeneration, right? This idea of like regenerating what exists within us, and that like, just the thing that I would offer to you is like everything that you said, but also just know that like just past that feeling where you're at right now, if you push through and make in your truth and speak to yourself and your people and continue on that path just beyond this place that you are right now, this tension that you feel right now, there's a great release. Because you start to see so much more clearly beyond this space, right? When you step over that hurdle that is like, why is this happening? Why do people feel this? Why do people say this? Why isn't everybody else enraged about this? The truth is that like we have been, and we are, right? And then we stepped just one toe past that. You're so close is maybe like my real advice to you, is that tension that you feel is important. It's part of this regenerative process. Whether or not you feel connected to yourself, to this culture, to that culture, to these cultures, that's why I think of it as regeneration, right? It's an important step in the process. And without that tension, it's hard to actually like tap into the strength that's required to continue making in your truth.
Yes. Yeah, I just want to add to that as well. Two things. I'm also a filmmaker, but the professor side of me wants to say something first to you. And the professor side of me wants to say, redefine what success looks like to you. Because a lot of us get caught in this idea of success looks like I have to work for the Whitney. No shade to Whitney, because I have friends at Whitney. But I have to work at the Whitney in order to be a valued curator. I have to move in this way. I have to appeal to these people in order to move the needle. Redefine success for you based on what you feel, what culture you want to bring forward, what you have to say. That's the beginning. Then lean into it all the way. You know, that's the professor. As the filmmaker, talk to me afterwards.
Yes, I love it.
And can I just say, the important thing about all of this is when you step past that tension, it is an invitation for somebody who feels just like you to do the same. That is how we pay all of this shit forward. And that is the point of this collective modernity, as we're calling, or whatever we're calling it. That is how we exist whole in the future. Everything we do is an invitation for someone else to step past their discomfort into the truth of their lives.
I have to say just one. I'll be so quick. I'm so sorry.
We're gonna end on this.
I will go back to, if you remember, I started and I was talking about the Haitian Revolution and how it started, right? How it started, not how it ended, but in fact how it started. And to me, and that's why I say that story is you have to think of a people standing at what I would consider to be world's end, feeling that very tension so deeply that you're feeling now. And it was tapping into the within, right? Tapping into what they know they have, what we know we have, that shored us up in such a way that we are still feeling the ripple and rupture of in the world today. That's that feeling. That's that thing that we're talking about, right? So do that. Don't worry about all these other systems or the building you're supposed to be in or the thing. I've done all. If it's a pedigree, I have it, right? So I really will say that it's like remembering that we are capable of redefining what that success is in such a way that quite literally shifts the world.
Right. Yes. Okay, listen. I've been throwing these bows for you because you were the first person. When I came in early, you were coming in front of me. So I wanted to hold space and time for you to be able to ask your question because you've waited here patiently for a long time.
Thank you for that. Bonsoir. My name is Terry. So my question is mainly directed towards Amy. There was
call me out. Shit.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
There you go.
There was a quote mentioned earlier regarding Black art movement.
Larry Neal.
Larry Neal, do you mind repeating the quote, please?
I'm not going to say it exactly how he said it, but paraphrasing. What he was saying was that the Black arts movement was founded to be radically opposed to anything that removes Black artists away from the Black community and from doing that work. And I believe in that wholeheartedly. I was not born in the 60s, but I uphold the values of the Black arts movement, of the Negritude movement, and so forth and so forth, and the Haitian Revolution. That Constitution means everything to me, So, yeah, Larry Neal, read it. And his book. What's the name of the book? It's yellow. Toward. What is it called? Toward something. This is bad. Toward a Black Aesthetic. Thank you. Read that.
What's it called again?
Larry Neal.
Larry Neal, the book.
Toward a Black Aesthetic.
Toward a Black
And
Aesthetic.
while you're at it, read Christina Sharp, In the Wake.
Read everything
right?
Christina Sharp has written.
Snap. Read that too. I'll give you a whole syllabus if you like.
Oh, please.
I'm happy to do that.
My follow-up question was for you to further elaborate on that quote, because my experience as a Black visual artist is as when my family sees it, me trying to pursue into arts is trying to get into a white space, and I was like, no, that's not really. That's
that definition of success again. What is it for you?
Yeah, and it's definitely not going into white spaces.
But here's the thing. I'm not saying, okay, I want to be clear about what I'm saying because it sounds like I'm anti-white spaces or anti-mainstream spaces. What I'm saying is that go where you're celebrated, number one, right? Can I get the
Yeah.
Thank you. That's number one, right? That meme is my favorite meme on Instagram. I do it for everything. But yeah, the second thing is not only, yes, go where you're celebrated, but also don't forget where you came from as well. Because what I see oftentimes, and that's what I'm speaking to, is that I'll see Black artists start with us and be catapulted to a certain place because of us. And then when they get to a certain place, they forget us. And all of a sudden, we're not on their CVs anymore. So it's what is success for you? How are you celebrating it? Who can celebrate with you in that idea of what success is and how you want to bring your vision to fruition, right? And nurture them back. Don't forget them. So you have to see it as an ecosystem, not I'm using this as a way as a launch pad and then I'm done. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go on.
It's this idea of don't use the system that was designed to hurt you against the people who are helping you, right? Don't become extractive in your own community. That's what keeps me on that land.
Yeah.
That's what keeps me seeing those people as whole people who really exist, whether anybody here cares about them or not, who are real. That's what propels me forward, and that's what brings me back.
All right.
Did we answer your question?
Shay.
No, yeah, beautifully. Merci beaucoup.
You did. Yes, clap it up for our panelists. Clap it up for yourselves. You've been wonderful. This has been wonderful. Such a special convening. I want to thank you all for being with us tonight. Again, big thank yous to New York Philharmonic, big thank yous to the staff of the Graduate Center for making space, and make sure you go see Nathalie's show at the Philharmonic. All right? Have a good evening.